Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie.
And a very good afternoon to you if you're watching us live on all of our social streams, which obviously every Friday afternoon we stream Friday Night Racing at 3 o'clock on Facebook, on YouTube, and of course on offtheball.com. And then every Friday evening we're live on News Talk Radio from 8 o'clock. Our guest this week is Brian Kavanagh, who's the Chief Executive of Horse Racing Ireland. Brian, you're very welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Great, Ger. Great to be here.
Before we talk racing, I need to talk about football. You're a long-suffering Leeds fan, I believe.
You said you wouldn't bring this up, Johnny. But, yes, long-suffering, but hopeful this year. Love watching Leeds, love following them, go over to a few of their games each year. There's a gang of us in racing. In fact, there's a pocket of Leeds fans in Irish racing. So Eddie Scally from Gowran and myself and Michael Higgins go over to a few of the games. Johnny came with us to one of them last year.
Majewski 5.
Yeah.
Went to see, it was around the time that Bamford could have declared for Ireland.
That was it.
That's right.
Yeah. So they kind of stood around the bus like teenage fans afterwards, waiting to get to talk to Bamford and obviously Bielsa.
We were trying to give Johnny a scoop, and he stayed in the car and wouldn't come out. But we waited after the match and met Bielsa and met Bamford, and it was great.
Oh yeah, so Bielsa, you like Bielsa, you're a fan of it.
Yeah, I love him. I follow him very closely. Their Leeds under-23s are playing Birmingham at the moment, and Bielsa's brought a whole new culture to the club. Leeds have been in the doldrums for 10, 15 years, and he's brought this pride back into the city. They're a one-club city, Leeds, and the fans are fanatical about football, but they've been on their knees for too long, so he got our hopes up last year, and he's getting them up again this year, so hopefully we'll see it through. Yeah, no, I think they definitely will. I'm just interested now that we brought this up, but do you take stuff from other sport as somebody who's in a leadership role in a sports organisation? Oh yeah, definitely. You'd be always watching other sports and watching what's going on and watching the events or watching the politics of it or the financing of it. Yeah, definitely.
It's a funny job, and it's a funny in terms of peculiar. It's not a sports organisation. It's an agricultural business, and yet it is a sports organisation. It's an entertainment company. Like, what does HRI do? I guess is the kind of.
It's a bit of everything. It's a good way of putting it. The racing and what goes on the track is one aspect of what we do. But I suppose Horse Racing Ireland is responsible for all aspects of the horse racing industry, and we call it an industry in Ireland. That's the breeding, the racing. We operate the tote. We license bookmakers, responsible for all the finances of the sport, the strategy of the sport going forward, relations with government. So basically anything that goes wrong in racing ends up on my desk, and I get blamed for it. But I used to go racing before I worked in racing, and the horses appeared in the parade ring, and that was it. You never thought of what goes on behind it, and it's fascinating when you strip back and see the layers of industry that goes on and the passion that people bring to their work, and that's one of the real satisfying parts of the job. So it's a good sector for Ireland. We've got sort of natural advantages in sort of raising horses and bringing up horses. We've got very good people, and on the back of that, we've been able to develop a credible industry that's gone global in recent years. So it's great.
There's a load to unpack in that. What are our natural advantages?
Without being flippant, rain, climate, soil. We have a limestone-based soil in Ireland, which is really suitable to the development of young horses, durability in their bones. Irish horses will be renowned for their toughness, for their stamina, and for their durability. We've got a long tradition of people. If you look at you've had guests in here over the last year where there's a huge family thing in racing where people pass on this love for horses, and it's as simple as that. Their comfort and their ability to handle horses from generation to generation, and it's amazing when you go to other countries. I went to the Breeders' Cup last year. We're out the track in the morning when the horses were training with Aidan O'Brien. And you just look at the quality of rider, and it's not a patch on the quality of work riders and staff you'd have in Ireland. And in fairness, there's been consistent government support for the industry over the years. So I think they're the 3 or 4 both natural and then, as I said, policy advantages that we have.
There's a strange thing as well, I think, that because Ireland was quite a backward country for so long, lagging behind, that we were reliant on horses in our work. Yeah. And Jim Bulger would talk about that when he was a child, growing up, the horse was just part of the farm. The horse was everything. They knew the horse, they knew the cattle, they knew the animals, but we used horses when other people were probably using automobiles, and we have a natural affinity going back a long way to horses, and that's something we should definitely, as a nation, that we are uniquely leaders in, I think.
Yeah, you see it in other countries. You know, I think people in Ireland, even people based in urban-based, they're probably 1 or 2 generations away from the land or from the country. I think you go to countries like Britain or America, and it's hard to get people, it's hard to get politicians to relate to horses, horse racing, because they become such urban societies, and there's people in these countries who just don't relate or haven't even seen, you know, horses other than, you know, on the TV,
yeah.
you know. So
look, the issue, I wasn't going to go straight into this, but the modernity is obviously something which we all have to deal with. This format, this show didn't exist 2 years ago, and now it does, and everybody kind of takes it for granted. So what's the future for how we're going to consume racing, and how do you prepare the industry for what's coming down the tracks?
Well, I think the good thing is there'll always be a winning post, and there'll always be a starting stall, and there'll always be one horse finishing in front of the other at that winning post. So the event is very simple and straightforward. What's very interesting is the way in which people are participating in that now and consuming it, you know, and that has changed and is changing rapidly in terms of the televising of racing, people watching sport at home now, people, you know, we've some interesting statistics now in relation to our most recent media rights deals where, you know, we've got an average of 135,000 streams per race meeting. You know, that means that 135,000 times each day, you know, it's averaging 15,000, 16,000 per race. People will watch a race away from the racetrack on their telephone, on their mobile service. So there's more of that coming. There's obviously a lot of people consuming racing on the racing TV channel, people consuming it in betting shops away from the track. And that's a challenge, I think, for a lot of sports, racing included, to encourage the live participation at the big events. What you find is people are very inclined, more and more, in fact, want to go to the big events. The challenge is the shoulder events. And you have to accept that there are events which, you know, maybe you're not running it to bring a huge crowd in. You're running it, you know, at Dundalk tonight, while there mightn't be a very large crowd there, that meeting will be broadcast, you know, around the world. It'll be the mainstay of the betting shops on a Friday night in Ireland and the UK. A lot of jockeys will get a day's wages out of it. You know, trainers will earn their prize money, and each horse that wins will get a winning bracket for its breeder. So it's, you know, there's a whole lot of different aspects to a race meeting than just, you know, how many people turn up in the day and watch it, you know.
The racing TV deal, how do you feel about how that's gone now? Because obviously there was opposition to it, and there's definitely been kinks along the way where some of the English races were given priority over some of the Irish races. So that's obviously still being worked out.
Yeah, I think the racing TV are extremely proactive in terms of any feedback that we give them. Commercially, it's a very strong deal for Irish racing, a very good deal, and it's put our rights up there with the main British race courses in terms of their value and in terms of their accessibility. You know, they have some teething problems, but they've overcome them, and certainly this Christmas, you know, they put on a separate channel on St. Stephen's Day to show Irish racing only, which was a great success. I think the quality of their presenters, you know, is excellent. They've taken on Ruby Walsh and Fran Berry as presenters recently, and they're both excellent, just out of retired from racing, and they've you know, retained Kevin O'Ryan and Gary O'Brien. So, you know, the coverage is very good. It's an evolution, as I said, and it's only one aspect of the media rights package.
With all these deals too, we see that there's initial people don't like change, and they don't like paying for stuff that they used to get for nothing, and then over a period of time things become more diverse. And even this week with Brawley working with Air Sport, it's like, look, that decision has been made and everybody's moving on. Is that kind of how you feel about that now, that the decision was made and you're getting on with it?
Oh yeah, no, I'm more concerned about the availability and accessibility and things you mentioned there, like clashing fixtures and stuff like that. I think, you know, the concept of, you know, putting on race meetings and charging people at the gate to travel to the race meeting and go to the event, and yet at the same time offering it for free, you know, to stay at home and watch it on your sofa, is just not reconcilable.
That was,
you know,
something that, now, as much as I should admit that I do a bit of work for Racing TV, but I never got this revolt, because I don't know where people thought that everyone should be entitled to watch every race for free in the first place. And there was this kind of story about, well, my father at home or my grandfather at home, he's not going to be paying 30 quid a month or whatever it is, but when were we entitled to watch can we watch every single football game for free? Why could we watch every race meeting for free? And in fairness to Racing TV, they'll admit there have been a lot of teething problems, but I would hope people will go racing more, and I don't think if everything was available for free at home, there wouldn't be much of an incentive to go racing in the first place. And even still with Racing TV, you can't necessarily see the horse who's pulling very hard going down at the start. You can't see the horse in the parade ring who's sweating up. As much as they can't show everything, and there's still a great incentive, to my mind, if you're a proper punter, to go racing, because you'll pick up things that you just can't pick up at home.
How are attendances holding up?
Yeah, they're good. They're up about 4%, I think, year on year last year. But it's very much what I said to you there, that the bigger meetings are strong and the shoulder meetings are not so strong. Christmas is very good. Weather was very kind to us. They had very good crowds, 14,000 in Limerick on St. Stephen's Day. See Faugheen, Tramore, very good. New Year's Day. Naas started off the year well. So there'll be about 1.3 million people going racing in Ireland last year.
That's the continuous battle for hearts and minds, and it's obviously the hardest thing in the world because you don't know. Everybody likes to go to one thing all of a sudden, and something new comes along. So, what do you do to grow that? How do you convince more and more people to go or to try it?
Shows like yours and the deal we've done with News Talk in terms of the off the ball program is bringing racing to maybe a broader audience than just the racing aficionado. It's looking at the sports fan and trying to grow it that way. I think we've invested significantly in facilities and racetracks over the last 10 or 15 years. There's still more to do. So when people go, they know they're going to have a good experience. They're going to have good quality facilities, put on competitive racing. You know when you go to the Dublin Racing Festival in Leopardstown at the start of February, you're seeing the best national hunt horses that you can see. So we've been able to achieve the situation where the best horses in the world are now being kept in training in Ireland. So it's a combination of all those things. I think you have to offer a good product both on the track and on the facilities. You have to market it and promote it well, as I said, through organisations like your own, and then the tracks have to deliver on the day in terms of their catering, their food and beverage, all that.
Because the expectations are that they're going to go and have an experience similar to if they were at any restaurant wherever.
Correct. Yeah.
It is a challenge because if you go to a particular flat meeting, maybe if there are 35-minute gaps, the actual sport is maybe 5-10% of the whole day, 5-10%. So there's 90-95% of stuff that isn't actually the sport taking place. So that's racing's challenge, to sell that. I think it's a beautiful social experience to meet people, to see the horses in their flesh. But in the era of dwindling attention spans and people doing everything on their phone, it's a massive challenge. You see race meetings in the States now. The only reason they're surviving is because there's a casino on the track. Nobody goes racing anymore.
I think we'd end up like that, but you hit the nail on the head there with the word meetings. It's called race meeting.
Yeah,
you go to meet people.
Like Naas for their big meet the other day. I hadn't been at Naas in a while, maybe since the summer, and it was fantastic. Just meeting people I hadn't seen in a long time, and there is that aspect to it. It's actually nice in our ever changing world to go out and meet people you haven't met before, and to talk about horses, old people, young people, see the horses in the parade ring, see them up close when they're jumping a fence, stuff like that. But we do need to sell it. It's the biggest challenge to racing, is to get people to go racing, because as much as we can do, there's only so much we can do, I think, to get people racing.
Brian, you talked about the facilities and you talked about the quality of the racing. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the public investment in this, the taxpayers' money. Obviously, everything comes under a lot of scrutiny, and I think particularly the greyhound industry came in rightly for a lot of criticism over the last year, and you're part of the same act, so you always get kind of like it's the horse and greyhound fund. So you end up kind of okay, well, we just need to make sure that we can justify everything we're doing. How does the industry work, and how do you stand over the public investment? What's the point of the public investment? What do we get for it?
Anna, we're hugely conscious of that, and we would say that our industry offers really good value for the money that the government spend on it. Deloitte's did a study for us 2 years ago, which showed that for every euro that's put into the game, the economy gets a 30 times impact. So the total economic impact of the industry is 1.9 1.9, just under 2 billion a year. But the important thing on that is that that's in rural towns and counties around the country. It's not East Coast, it's not Dublin centric. So, if you were to justify it purely as a sport, you couldn't. But if you look at this is if this industry wasn't in Ireland, right, it would be tailor-made for the type of industry that people want to be drawn into the country. It's environmentally sound, it's low intensive land use. It's something which we've got indigenous skills that we touched on earlier. It's something that's export driven, so it leads to a lot of foreign money coming into the country. It's something in which we have natural advantages. We've been proven time again on the track and in the sales rings around the world to be successful, and it's generating significant employment, 29,000 jobs in rural Ireland. So if we talk about the Joseph O'Briens or the Gordon Elliots or the Aidan O'Briens, but they're employing people in Piltown, in Rose Green, in Summerhill, in Meath, Jessica Harrington and Moon in County Kildare. There's no one else generating the level of employment that these people are generating, So I think it's a beautiful industry in that sense, that it can generate a significant return. That creates economic activity, economic output, and as I said, it leads to a lot of employment. So, if we're looking to reinvigorate rural Ireland, there you go. You've got your perfect example.
I think a lot of people, and I would have been guilty of this in the past myself, going, the government puts in a certain amount of money, a lot of that goes to prize money. What's the point of that? But the point of that, I suppose, is that if we're going to be an export industry, you have to have good quality stuff. So just explain how that whole jigsaw puts together.
Yeah, you do. The prize fund is made up from three sources. The owners put in money through entry fees. We put in money through our own sources, which, as I say, comes indirectly through the betting tax from government, and racecourses generate sponsorship. But what you need to remember is that a far higher proportion of money is spent by the owners. Like approximately 1 out of 9 horses that's in training every year actually wins a race.
You get back about 20% of what you put in.
So when sometimes some of the stats that you have for one purpose are for another purpose. But the reality is that the people who are earning this prize money are spending a huge amount more to generate that prize money. They're buying these horses, they're buying them from breeders who've had to raise the horses from the day they were foaled. They've all employed vets, they've all employed farriers to get the horse to the stage where someone's prepared to sell it or to buy it. They run a point to points, it keeps that whole network going, So, and that's what I say, that's money in a lot of cases which is coming from overseas, because it's overseas owners who otherwise would never spend it in Ireland. So, you look at Willie Mullins, and he's training horses for a lot of English owners, So the English owners are employing Willie to train their horses. Willie in turn then employs, for those horses, maybe 20, 30, 40 staff just for those overseas owned horses. That generates their wages. It generates all the money they spend in the shops in Bagnallstown, in the local community. That's money that wouldn't come into Ireland if horse racing wasn't attracting these international owners to have their horses here. You extend that then to a higher stage or a larger stage with the likes of the Dubai connection, Sheikh Mohammed basing his stud farms in Ireland, the Aga Khan basing his stud farms in Ireland. These are employing hundreds of people, again, attracted to our country because of the excellence that we have at horse racing. If they weren't doing that, they might be a yacht in the south of France or something like that. So that's the logic of a government policy saying, this is something that we can compete internationally at.
And the prize money,
prize money is an incentive.
If we'll say the prize money for the Leopardstown Gold Cup has gone from, I think, 200 to 250. To me, I could argue the case that that's not really actually going to benefit anyone except the owners. It's still going to get a very good turnout. It's the prize money at the bottom level in particular, where, in fairness to HRI, it has enshrined that it's 10 grand minimum for any race. If you're going to race in Britain you win a bumper and you win 1,1700 quid, it doesn't cover your training fees for that month alone, after deductions to the horse and the trainer. If you want to have a horse and train in Britain now, it's economic basket case stuff. At least in Ireland, you've a reasonable, if you win a race, it'll cover you for a hell of a lot of the year, and there is an incentive for owners, because if the prize money in Ireland were akin to what it is in Britain, the industry would pretty much collapse, I think, in this country, being honest. So you have a French model where it's all sort of a tote monopoly, which you'll see in the States, so they're very, very good purses. We're not going to have a tote monopoly over here. So I think at least we've some balance, because Britain faces a serious challenge in the future to fund its races, and you see horsemen complaining all the time that they're not going to, they boycott certain tracks because of prize money, and in fairness to Ireland, at least we have a reasonable purse for even the lower grade horse.
Yeah, I mean, prize money is a key incentive. You're not going to have too many racehorse owners floating their activity on the stock exchange. People have to accept that owning a horse is a hobby. It's a but for a very small group that are engaged in the breeding sector at the top level, it's a hobby activity, and prize money is necessary to defray the costs and to encourage people to have horses here. Signs are on it. I mean, you look at the races in the UK yesterday. Willie Mullins won the bumper with Panic Attack.
Market Raisin.
It's a Market Raisin mare owned by Tony Bloom, who owns Brighton Football Club, English guy, basing his horse over here because he's attracted by the prize money, attracted by the quality of the trainers.
Kenneth Alexander, you have the Wileys, you have Rich Ritchie, who's an American banker based in England. The reason they have horse over here is partly because of the quality of our trainers, but there's no doubt that the prize money is a huge incentive because it's making them lose less, basically.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to think about this in the terms of the multinationals, if the Googles and Facebooks are getting some advantage, why don't we actually try and incentivise people to come and spend money and invest in areas that, as you said, aren't just Dublin 2 or Dublin 4?
Yeah, that's the thinking behind it, and it's an internationally competitive thing. If we don't do that, France will do it, or as Johnny says, if and when the UK get their funding structure sorted, they'll do it. And certainly post Brexit, there's a lot of talk about improving the situation for British-bred horses, encouraging people to have horses in training in Britain, so that it's a competitive environment. We've got to step up to the plate.
Let's talk about gambling, because obviously we saw some changes in the industry midweek in the UK. No longer going to be able to use credit cards to lodge money online. Going to be able to use debit cards. Most people have debit cards anyway, so it's not as drastic a thing as it initially seems on first look. But there is a wind, and it's blowing one direction in terms of advertising around the gambling industry, and even the amount of money that might be ring-fenced for racing in Ireland. Niall Quinn's been talking about some of that money going to football. So it's obviously not a straightforward relationship. What is the future, and what is an accommodation that everybody can look at and go, yeah, okay, actually, I understand that it's an industry that exists, we're going to regulate it properly, it's going to have a relationship with racing, that relationship has to be strong because essentially it's one of the main economic drivers for it, and everybody's going to be responsible about it, because I think that's what certainly the media wants. It's certainly, I presume, what the industry wants.
Yeah, I think there's two issues. There's and a lot of progress has been made on one of them, which is the one that's perhaps of direct concern to us, and that's the whole question of taxation of gambling and how the government taxes gambling. Gambling and racing are inextricably linked. Racing is the mainstay of the betting industry, and the reason for that is because of the volume that 363 days a year. There's racing output. Most times of the day, afternoon and evening time. Whereas gambling and other activities is more sporadic. Obviously, there's plenty of interest in football gambling, but there's not the same consistency of football offerings. So
not far off.
Not far off. No, not far off. But in the last number of years, the government here and in the UK have made two or three important moves. They've moved to up to about 5 years ago, there was no tax paid on betting offshore. So a lot of telephone or internet betting was routed through Gibraltar or routed through tax havens to avoid paying betting tax. That loophole has been closed, and government have started looking at the rate of betting tax. We still feel there's perhaps some scope for further increasing that rate, and that should provide the basis of providing funding back to horse racing, because you then have a situation which is what applies all around the world, whereby government introduces some sort of arrangement to address this anomaly, whereby racing creates a product and then gambling uses that product or exploits that product without maybe paying for the staging of the event. So whether it's a tote monopoly in France or in Hong Kong or in Japan, or whether it's a levy in the UK, or whether it's the Horse and Greyhound Fund, the government creates that mechanism. But what it means more importantly is that the industry is then funded from gambling taxes, which are taxes paid by those who choose to bet on an activity, rather than from the general tax purse, which is used for other social purposes. So a lot of progress has been made on that front. The issue that's really come sharp into focus in the last number of years, and I think this is a real issue for the gambling industry to address, is the whole question of problem gambling and underage gambling and the availability of gambling products and all that sort of stuff. And it is incredible to me to see the change of attitude of policymakers in Ireland and the UK towards the betting industry in that respect. That whereas it's moved from something desirable and attractive to something that people are now very, very careful about getting involved with, and that's I think we all need to be cognizant of that, but particularly the gambling sector, that they can show, that they're operating in a responsible fashion. And in fairness, I think they've brought in a lot of measures in recent years to that effect.
We introduced a show talking about football today. We had a situation where one of the leading bookmakers basically incentivised people to open up an account to watch the FA Cup game of their choice last weekend or the weekend before that. This is seriously questionable territory for anyone to be going down. It's like, if you want to watch that game, and we all know there are illegal streams for all these games, or for many games, but if you want to watch this game, in effect, join us and put money in your account, and then you can watch a bet. Now, the chances are that person will lose money to that bookmaker if he or she decides to stay on for any length of time. But eventually that person, if he or she is any good, will be shut down. So we have a situation where, as Brian says, I'm thankful to the governments that they are wary of problem gambling, which will ruin many people's lives and end up in many suicides, and this has been shown to be the case. So the question I have for Brian, and I brought this up to you before, is can we not get to a situation where at one end the bookmaker is accommodating people who are gambling too much and are losing lots of money, but at the one end, the guy who wants 50 quid each way following form is shut down within 2 or 3 months just because he might be winning a few quid off them? And could we get to a situation where if you want to take a bet on Irish racing, you're obliged to lay a minimum lay like they've done in New South Wales of say 500 or 1,000, even if it's only win only, no guaranteed odds? Is it ever possible? Because I speak on behalf of the likes of me and my myriad of friends who can't get bets on anymore because of the way the gambling industry has gone. And to just extrapolate on that, it's a lot easier now to lay a bet on Liverpool and Manchester United after the game has started, for example, by using a model that you just need to click a button, than it is to come up with the price for a horse race. And horse racing won't be insured of the place it has had in the past forevermore. So I'm wondering what your position is on that.
Well, I'm not going to duck it, but it is, I mean, the only control we would have in that area would be in relation to on-course betting, because we license the on-course bookmakers. That is an issue, and there's no doubt it is a real issue for the off-course betting industry. As you said, we hear from time to time that if you're winning, your business is not welcome. If you're losing, the red carpet is in front of you. But I think there's a new gambling regulator is going to come in. Once the new government is in situ, there's been pressure and talk for the last 10 years. So, David Stanton has done a lot of work about bringing in a gambling regulator. And I think it's long past the time that Ireland has a gambling regulator that then would deal with those sort of issues.
And the bookmaker doesn't need to be afraid of this. I genuinely believe that. From the bookmaker's perspective, if you wanted to have 50 grand on a horse at even money, you could get 50 people putting on 1,000 quid at the same time, just for example, and the bookmakers will argue that this is very feasible. So measures have to be taken that doesn't happen. But I think we need to get back to a situation where bookmakers were bookmakers and laying bets rather than shutting down accounts of people who might make a few bob and laying people who want to bet on football, because racing can't be assured of its position forevermore.
No, so to answer your question, Jared, it's a complex relationship.
Yeah. It is a complex relationship, isn't it?
But it's, I think ultimately, we work well together. Bookmakers are great sponsors of some of our biggest races.
And they promote racing. So
it's changing times, it's changing times in their industry, and, that's difficult for everyone.
Yeah, I think they're aware of it too, though, because you can see how quickly public opinion shifts.
Yeah.
And once public opinion shifts, you cannot move it back for a decade or decade and a half.
That's been very noticeable, and at the same time, what has happened for the betting industry is this grand new territory of the United States has opened up, where betting has suddenly become legal throughout the whole of the States, which dwarfs any issues that we might be able to discuss about the British and Irish market. So a lot of the betting companies have switched their focus to those markets.
If you listen to the biggest sports media companies in the States, listen to a lot of the stuff over there, they're like mad. They're just absolutely gamble on absolutely everything, and they've all introduced their own. There's a daily betting show on Fox Sports 1. The Disney, who own ESPN, have loads and loads of. So it's very interesting to see how that first flush of.
And it's kind of. It's dubious territory in the sense that, I would nearly frame all sporting events now in some sort of gambling context, in that Manchester United and Liverpool are playing on Sunday. What's the price for that? I would 100% know the price before the game starts, and bookmakers are conscious of that. And you see so many ads during programmes. I do think we need to take measures such that if you don't really want to be putting gambling advertising towards kids because they don't realise how belligerent this can be and so forth. And I'm
that's
conscious
why a
of that as
regulator
well.
is required.
Yeah. What happened as well 10, 12 years ago was that the rate of betting tax, and just talking again about Ireland and the UK, came down, and in fact came down to zero, to a situation where punters weren't paying tax. And there was a lot of effective lobbying from the betting industry, that it should be a tax-free activity. At the same time as technology advanced it, which made accessibility so much more. And that's a dangerous mix. Suddenly you've got a tax-free activity. Sometimes people are trying to restrict activities. One of the solutions to it is to increase the tax rates on it. But the bookmakers brought the tax down, so when you have a bet now, you're not paying any tax on it at a time when it became much more widespread available. So that's the sort of genesis of the current situation. But it's interesting, as you say, what's happening in the States is probably what was happening here 20 years ago, but on a much grander scale.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how quickly the backlash comes to that and what they do about that. There's a couple of other things that I wanted to ask you about. The situation of flat racing at the moment. Some flat trainers are not despairing, but they're just concerned about the fact that there aren't enough people going flat racing, and yet we have this product again where the best horses in the world are out and available for the public to watch again and again. So
yeah, I'm not sure it's more complex than that. I don't think it's fair to say that there's any major difference between attendances and flat meetings and jump meetings. The bigger.
So I didn't realise that. I would have just assumed that there's.
There would too
there will be more festivals over the jumps than there will be on the flat, which is one thing. Which is
your bad jumps meeting will get a reasonable crowd. Your bad flat meeting might get virtually no one. And that's a problem because in some areas there's a flat meeting on the good track, but like Fairy House is not really, for example, Fairy House, maybe Mallow, the likes of Gorn, they're not really flat areas. So so that's not. It's just like having a football game in Kilkenny to a degree.
Yeah, but I think what you have to appreciate is for jump racing effectively only happens in Britain, France, and Ireland. Flat racing is linked into the breeding industry and is a global activity. So there's a much more global aspect to flat racing. I think the situation with the trainers. In some ways, while you have Aidan O'Brien, who, as you say, is the Barcelona or the Real Madrid of the training ranks, there's now a huge amount, and he's raised the bar, but you now see the likes of Jessica Harrington, Ger Lyons, Dermot Well, Jim Bulger, who've been there for a long time, young Joseph O'Brien now coming through. So there's a greater degree of competition, perhaps not at the elite level, but throughout the whole of the flat ranks. And the way things are structured at the minute is that, it's very, very competitive racing on the flat in Ireland. A couple of things, if you look at we spoke earlier about the capital investment. There's a major capital investment on the Curragh, and they had their first year last year. Pat Keogh's gone into manage the place. That's a flagship flat course, which this year will be a very important year for the Curragh. You look at Leopardstown during the summer. Leopardstown races 22 times a year, but only six I think of their meetings are jumps meetings.
Okay.
So the vast bulk of Leopardstown's racing is flat racing. Leopardstown won the race course of the year last year, 2 years ago. So there's an element of when you strip it back. If you look at their summer Thursday nights, really popular. Look at some of the more the summer circuit of holiday meetings, which are wonderful part of the Irish racing scene. Mostly those meetings are either mixed meetings or they're one day flat, one day national hunt. So it's complex. We had it as well. On the jumps, you had a situation 5-10 years ago. People said Willie Mullins, no one's to challenge him. It's ruining jump racing. Then Gordon Elliott came along and said, "Oh, Willie and Gordon, there's only the two of them." Now you see Henry de Bromhead has emerged. Jessica is there. Joseph is there. Noel Meade having a very good year. So I think once you put on high quality activity, once you attract an elite competitor, they then raise the bar for everyone else, and I think that's the way you have to go.
So then it's if I'm reading you right, what you're talking about is building this ecosystem, and it can seem like, because you do have a preeminent team in Coolmore and Aidan O'Brien, that it's very difficult for everybody else to get in, but that competitive balance will just raise over a period of time.
To borrow the hurling analogy as well, like Kilkenny did raise the standards of other of other teams, and we go to Cheltenham now expecting to have more winners than the British. That's an incredible situation where we went in the 80s. We went a year without a winner at all at Cheltenham, and granted, you can look at our structural funding and all that, but we expect Aidan O'Brien to basically win races in England and France every other weekend. We expect to go to Cheltenham to have more winners than the British, and we're probably not proud enough as a nation of how good we are at horse racing. I know we have a lot of begrudgers.
I think that just on that point, I think some of them were, it's very difficult taking on Aidan O'Brien on the flat, but trainers would prefer to be doing that than not have him there, on the basis that, if you have a horse that can compete with, these top quality horses, A, you've got a valuable horse if you want to sell it. B, you've got, a valuable horse for breeding prospects going forward. And they're all elements of the flat scene that are, perhaps not fully appreciated or understood. So, to Johnny's point there, just looking at a few stats, in the 3 years, 88, 89 and 90, we had 2 winners in Cheltenham, 1 and 0, I think, in each of those years. In the last 3 years, we had 50 winners. So, I mean, it's an incredible change. But I think your question is more, how do you translate that success into popular appeal or attendance at the event? You know? Slow burn, and I think you've got to explain, to people like, as I said, at the Dublin Racing Festival in 2 weeks' time, these are the best, these are the elite, the Irish Champions Weekend, these are the best horses in the world.
But that's the thing, the Champions Weekend isn't that old. The Dublin Racing Festival, I think this is his 3rd year or 4th year, so these are the initiatives that are bringing people.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't underestimate. I mean, there was more people attending Leopardstown on Stephen's Day than attended Kempton for the King George, which is the biggest race in their calendar, So, and as you said, you don't just measure it by the number of people who are there; it's the number of people, eyeballs on it on TV.
We need to innovate as well in that, HD has been marvellous for David Attenborough and nature programmes. HD could be marvellous for racing, to see racing, and
huge difference, stuff
like that. And stuff like maybe having fancy football teams for horses, where you don't need to bet. You can get an enjoyment out of your horse winning, your trainer winning, or your jockey winning, depending on what race you win, the points you get to go up the table, or your goal difference, or whatever. So there's lots of things we can innovate, and we do have a very good product. But I do believe that shows like this actually do help to introduce people. We do need, most people who go racing or see horse for the first time, they come back like enriched from it, and we need to sell it as best we can, I think.
Yeah, no, don't disagree with any of that.
You've got to go down and see the parade ring is the thing that I remember from being a kid. It's like, that's the special bit where you're actually watching them and then picking.
And these are the best horse in the world. These are by Galileo.
That's the beauty though, Ger. Like, there's different things for different people. Like a race meeting, it's one person wants to go and see the horse in the parade ring because they understand what a good horse looks like, what to look for. Other people, like the jockeys. Other people go for the social. They go for the ladies' day competition, whatever it is. All those sort of things. So all those different aspects build up to a race day.
What's the biggest threat at the moment to the industry that you're kind of the existential threats, or what are you kind of keeping you awake at night?
Whether Leeds are going to sign a new striker during the transfer window.
Situation is good enough.
The local issue probably is Brexit, which is, we export 60% of Ireland produces the 3rd highest number of thoroughbred foals of any country in the world. So we've just under 9,500 foals born here. Only Australia and America produce more than that. That's more than we would ever need for racing in Ireland, or we would have owners for. So we export 60% of those horses every year. It's a huge trade. It's worth, $250 million a year to the economy. And 80% of those exports go to the UK. So that's... So we're glad to see some certainty coming in Brexit, and having got over the shock of Britain leaving the EU, we now want them to get on with it and do it at the end of January. We then have a transition period where we can negotiate a new arrangement, so that you want to have a situation where it's as easy to move horses, as easy to import and export horses between Britain and Ireland as it has been up to now. So that's.
Do you expect that to happen?
I'd be hopeful enough. I think it'll take time, and I think it's not probably helpful that Boris Johnson has put a sort of a December 2020 deadline on it, because these things will take deadlines. Time. Yeah, I think you'd hope that we can make the case. I think Ireland has got its voice heard very well in the previous withdrawal negotiations, and you'd hope that, particularly with Phil Hogan leading the discussions, who's a racehorse owner, that we'd be hopeful that our position can be put forward. I think Britain wants that as well. That they depend on Irish horses. If you look at a card any card in the UK tomorrow, probably more than half the horses were born in Ireland that are running there.
So are you lobbying with the BHA at the same time? So there's
and our French counterparts. We work together, the three countries. The challenge really was when you went to Brussels up to this, they didn't want to know about it because they said, look, we're just focused on the divorce, the split, the breakup. So they didn't want to know about future arrangements. Now the process has commenced to sit down and discuss. So we will put joint papers with the French and the British, and the whole thing will revolve. And this is why I would be hopeful around alignment or consistency of veterinary and animal welfare standards between the countries. So we need to be able to say, look, there's no risk here. If you're moving horses from Britain to Ireland, you're not going to bring in some exotic disease, or you're not going to expose the health of the herd or the health of the humans in the country by this. And we can do that if they keep the same standards, and I can't see any reason why in this modern age a country would want to reduce its animal welfare or its veterinary standards.
To extrapolate on that then, how important is the forthcoming election in Ireland?
Oh, it's important. It's very important. I think...
you fear like a potential rise of the left in terms of their potential difference towards racing?
No, I wouldn't
get... We're not beholden to Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil?
No, I wouldn't get party political on that at all. I think, the issues that we discussed earlier, apply across the spectrum. The question of rural Ireland is a question that applies to all political parties, and we're offering an industry that's a strong plus for rural Ireland, So I think what helped in recent years on Brexit in particular was the all-party support that the government had when they were going into negotiations. We had stability where Britain didn't, and what you would hope coming out of the election will be more stability going forward. We'll deal with whatever issues have to be dealt with after that, but I'm happy to make the case in front of any audience, for our industry. As I said, it's an industry that has very positive environmental credentials as well, in terms of its intensity of its land use. It's, you've seen a lot of the stud farms around the country. They're planting more trees than probably anyone else in the country. So it's interesting. But yeah, so that Brexit is probably the one of the issues that's keeping us awake at night.
Yeah, just as well, how has the betting tax worked in terms of changing the 2% and also just taxing people online, because that was something that obviously we were ahead of, I suppose, the Brits in terms of getting
we've been saying to the government before, that about 5 years ago the government was generating 26 million a year in tax of 5 billion in betting. It was, in my view, a ridiculously low figure.
That was turnover.
Accepting that the turnover is
you're going to win
churned.
some. Yeah.
But even if you took it that if you take it at a 10 or a 12% margin, to be generating tax of 25 million off that level of activity is still extremely low. So the first thing they did was they extended the tax to the telephone and internet. That doubled the take to 50 million, and last year they increased the rate to 2%, and the figures we've seen now is that the tax take for last year was 95 million. So the government has moved from a situation where it was getting 27 million in and had to top up that with the money they were giving horse racing to a situation where it's now getting 95 million in.
Well, that's transformative.
And giving horse racing 67.
It's a challenge for the bookmaker, though, for the independent bookmaker, and now there has been a little bit of a loosening of the in terms of the smaller bookmaker.
Yeah.
That is a huge challenge for because Brian will attest to this. The prize money, SAS money, is obviously tied to the bookmaking industry in Britain as well, and bookmaker shops are far from guaranteed into the future. Yeah,
but Johnny, the biggest challenge to the independent bookmaker is not the taxation system; it's the larger bookmaker.
Agreed.
I agree with
that.
What's happening in Ireland and the UK is the multiples are just getting bigger and bigger because
capitalism.
It's very hard because they've got the marketing budget to compete. They can say we'll offer you this money back, we'll offer you this promotion, and it's very hard for Gerard Gilroy, bookmaker, sole trader, to say okay, I can compete with that.
I do think though that if you're making the case to the public that the money that we're getting is actually just part of a tax take that is only being paid for by, and it's not general taxation that's paying for this. It's a completely different conversation.
Totally, and that's the case we've been making over the years, and that's the important thing is that's what happens in other countries. So if we are aspiring to have our industry as a world leader, and we're looking at an industry in which we have all the credentials for world leadership, why shouldn't we have a world leading or a world equivalent funding basis? And as I said, in France, the industry we're competing with gets 440 140 million a year to fund a racing industry that's 3 times as big as ours, and a breeding industry that's half the size of ours. So they've 440 million. But the reason they have it is because the only form of betting in France is tote betting. It's a tote monopoly. The government gave them that monopoly. So, you know, you want to be able to compete with these countries, because I'm absolutely certain we'll beat them in terms of the quality of our trainers, the quality of our riders, the quality of our horses. What would hold us back is a sort of an inadequate funding basis.
The only challenge to that, Brian, is that if you're, say, as I'm a League of Ireland fan, I don't necessarily think that me placing a bet in the League of Ireland should go into horse racing, the funds of that. So that, because whereas horse racing was whatever 90% of the law in terms of betting, that's obviously changed, and in-running betting and all that. So betting is exploding, racing's getting a smaller part of the pie.
Well,
that's the one.
But I would still say, you know, racing is the lion's share of the betting, and my view is that the government had the taxation basis right. There should be enough money for everyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You run into difficulties with other sports other than racing, where you've got the issue with youth participation, kids participation, and it's the issue of relation between GAA, rugby, soccer, and betting is a more complex one, I would say, than that between racing and those sectors, you know. But the reality, Ger, is that whatever country you deal with, there is some sort of a government or a statutory mechanism which gives a funding basis for an industry. So, you know, Hong Kong, great market for Irish horses, 6 million people, 2 race courses. The only form of gambling in that country is with the Hong Kong Jockey Club on horse racing or football. So it's the equivalent of saying to Horse Racing Ireland, you own every betting shop in Ireland. The only thing the punters can bet on is horse racing or football, and you get the proceeds to put it back in to develop your industry. You know, so it's that's a challenge, but as you say, I think it is a game changer. And what's happened over the last few years has been very positive, and the government have said they're going to do it progressively. Michael Noonan said, first thing he said is, I'm going to broaden the tax base, and he brought in the telephone and internet. Then I'll look at the rate. Pascal Donoghue said he'd look at the rate. Last year he increased it to 2%. It brought about the increase in which is now generating 95 million. Questionable in my mind whether the bookmakers should be paying all that or whether the punter should be paying some of that. That's not a popular thing to say, but it
used to be 10% for the punter.
Yeah,
I remember my dad back in Galway to beat Mayo, like at 8 to 11, and he had put on 100 quid. The bet came to 110 quid, and it was a wet day in Castlebar, and Mayo won. And so I was saying that wasn't a good bet. And I don't think, but that was I remember that quite distinctly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very revealing, Johnny.
Yeah, it was the day when it was very wet, and John Mahan changed all the Mayo lads' boots at half time. Galway were raging hot favourites because we played Tyrone the year before.
Slippery Mayo guys.
1996, Mayo went on to lose in two All-Ireland finals.
Willie Joe Padden.
It was before, after that actually. It was primarily Liam McHale in midfield destroyed Galway, and we had an off day that day, but we came back in 98.
All right,
as you remember, Ger.
I just want to tell everybody about Horses for Courses. It's a 6-week evening course on horse racing. It's starting in the Talbot Hotel in Stillorgan in Dublin on Monday the 10th of February all the way through to Monday the 16th of March. Runs from 7:30 to 9:30. Lecturers will include Brian Kavanagh, Dennis Egan, Keith Rowe, Shane O'Dwyer, Henry Bromhead, Pat Keogh, Don McLean and Leo Powell. It's all being organised by Mary Fitzgerald. You can get details and book tickets on eventbrite.ie or maryfitzgeraldpr.ie for 155 quid. You get a free day at the races and a trip to the Irish National Stud and Horse Museum included in that as well. How are you tipping horses, Brian? Because we could use with some help on the show.
I'm probably about as good as Johnny Ward.
Well,
I had a good weekend last weekend. I just didn't have it for off the ball.
Yeah, come on, Johnny. I mean, it's the worst form of after timing. A new year, I'm just going to read the script here because these are good. A new year hasn't seen a change in fortune for Johnny. His last weekend's selection, Sheb de Kavanagh, could only manage third at Punchestown. The Tote Injured Jockeys Fund has yet to get off the mark for 2020, but hopefully the luck can change this week. The Irish action will come from Navan tomorrow. On Sunday, there's 2 decent Grade 2 chases at Thurles. In the UK, brilliant card at Ascot, where the feature Clarence House Chase will see Defi Desoy and Undeso again clash after the pair served up a thriller in last one's Tingle Creek. And this week's bet is in Thurles on Sunday.
Arcadian Sunrise for John Queally and Dennis O'Regan in the 1 o'clock. This is a very big meet for Thurles. Thurles is a proper old traditional track that was privately owned and immaculately kept ground, one of the best ground, basically the best land in the country, I think. This is their Kinloch Bray meeting. The race is now registered as the Horse and Jockey Hotel Steeplechase. That's the name of it because it's sponsored by the Horse and Jockey Hotel, Grade 2 at 2:45. I was making this point actually to a few people, to see Alboom Photo in Tramore of all places on New Year's Day. The Gold Cup winner makes his return at Tramore. As much as Tramore is a low-grade track, I thought it was fantastic to see a very good horse bring a crowd to a low-grade track, and they appreciated that. To see the likes of Footpad, Hardline, Vada Rev, Real Steel turning up at Thurles on a Sunday in February is fantastic. Naas had that joy of having Envoy LN and all those horses. It's nice to spread the love around. Thurles is a fantastic card on Sunday. If you're doing nothing, by all means go, and you'll get a lovely rural setting, proper old style race meeting, and it's a cracking card. I obviously think Footpad will win very, very readily as long as he doesn't fall, and he's a good jumper in the 2:45.
Okay, Brian, are you following form and that kind of stuff?
I'd keep an interest. Yeah, I didn't look at the field of the weekend. I mean, I thought Footpad ran a great race in the King George. It just clearly was that he didn't stay. You know?
Yeah, I thought
so I think he's. What's the distance of Sunday's race?
2:04.
2:04. So he's probably good. But I mean, Willie has Real Steel in that race as well. Who on his day is very good. So you keep up with the form. I'm not. I wouldn't punt, like I did before I worked in racing, because you've enough of an interest now. You know the personalities involved. You follow. I like following the breeding of the horses and the pedigrees of the horses. So there's a huge amount of interest there anyway, without having a bet. But
when you finish up as chief executive of Horse Racing Ireland, will you stay in the industry? Is that something that you can see yourself doing, or will you move to a different industry? What do you think?
I'm the CEO of the FAI.
Don't know. I love the industry. It's a fantastic industry, and I mean I've been lucky enough to get involved in some of the global side of things with the various other racing authorities worldwide. So you'd like. Is
there not a sense though? I wouldn't mind trying something else. And then people in racing, you just get wrapped up in it, and all of a sudden you're a pensioner. And
well, it's a nice lifestyle.
It is.
And if you like it,
would you not try and go into the private sector or another sport, or would that be off the agenda?
I'd try anything, but I mean, you do worry at times you become one-dimensional, because racing. I think in my job the biggest challenge you have is the politics of it with the small p. You need to be able to relate to all the different sectors of the industry on their issues and on their level, and that's fascinating. That is really fascinating. That the on-course bookmaker's got one pitch, in Ballinrobe, comes at you with the same passion as the international breeder has got 100 mares, and you need to be able to. And that's the part of the challenge is that you respect all the stakeholders and respect their issues and be able to try and drive the thing forward. So. Don't know, Ger, who knows what the future holds, but I'm lucky enough that I was interested in racing before I worked in racing, and then someone said to me when I got the job, and said, make sure it doesn't consume you, and try and develop some other interests. But I've been blessed to be where your hobby is your job. It sort of doesn't really feel like work.
Yeah, sometimes that can become something where you end up resenting it, because...
Yeah, I've been lucky enough not to now, because I said I've met some great people, and racing is all about the people you meet and the people that you bump into along the way, and racing people have a great attitude. We saw it last year with the Pat Smullen fundraiser, where that was a real source of pride for all of us, that Pat led that fundraiser so well. So no, the opposite for me. I don't think you could ever resent racing now. It's I'd say if I won the lotto tomorrow, I'd still go to every race meeting I could get to.
Johnny, any other quick races that you want to talk about? The 320 in Thurles?
Willie holds the key to this again with Ellie May, who is... she actually started off over fences at Cork. She beat Augusta Gold very, very readily. Willie, as Brian said, unveiled a very nice filly by Camford Cliffs, won the bumper yesterday, Market Raising. This is a good race, but I think she's the class act, and it could be a big race one too. Navan as well tomorrow is quite a good meet. They have a good handicap hurdle there, and it's a nice weekend's racing, building up to the Dublin Racing Festival, which is on the start of next month. Unfortunately, we won't have time to talk about this, but I'm very disappointed the amount of British horse coming over to it. I think it's disappointing considering we've huge prize money they could only dream of over there, yet they won't bring horses over for it. So I'm disappointed in that, but I think we'll put on a good show.
Do you not think that reflects the balance of power at the moment, and it reflects the quality horses that are in training over here.
And the poverty of ambition and connection there.
yeah.
If I had a good horse, I'd love to go to Dublin for the weekend.
Well, perhaps, and also you see tomorrow, like Willie runs under Sow and Ascot, and that race, now I know he's going to get the ground he likes.
That's going to be an absolute cracker as well.
Soft ground, yeah, but I mean, there's no doubt if the ground came up soft at Cheltenham, he'd rock up at Cheltenham again under Sow. So it's, I think it's just a reflection that the better horses are in training in Ireland at the moment, and there's a lot of what might otherwise have been British horses are now trained in Ireland, owned by English people, but perhaps at a point-to-point sale in the UK, but put in training with Willie or Gordon or...
No, I agree with all that. I just think they should be a bit more adventurous in how they campaign the horse.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff, Brian. We'll leave it there. Thanks a million for joining us, and best of luck with everything into the future. A reminder, Friday Night Racing brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie, or of course you can follow the new Twitter account at HRI Racing, and the hashtag is every racing moment. We'll see you next Friday. Best of luck.
Friday Night Racing.
On Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie.